Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome to another forecast discussion. For those of you who are watching this on Saturday, March 5th, which should be all of you, this is being recorded on Friday night. I'll be off somewhere by this point. By the time you're listening to this, I'll be off somewhere in Nebraska or Iowa, actually going up to chase this event. So wouldn't really have time to do a forecast discussion in the morning, so doing it now here at night still should be a fruitful discussion here. So let's get started. We have a severe weather risk here for tomorrow, Saturday, March 5th, centered mainly on Iowa. Starting off, we have a slight risk in far eastern Nebraska, stretching through much of Iowa up into far southeast portions of Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin. But mainly centered on Iowa. We have a tornado threat as well, 5% there through much of Iowa, and a damaging wind and hail threat as well. Then on Sunday, we have a slight risk down toward the Red River region up through Arkansas into southern Missouri. I'm not going to go into detail on the Sunday setup in this video. We may have time to do another video, excuse me, on this setup at a later time. I'm going to focus on the Saturday setup here, today's setup. And so let's get started here. I'm going to try to make this a little bit quicker than normal. This is a pretty meteorologically sort of common setup here. There are a lot of analogs for this type of pattern, so we won't have to look at a lot of the cams for this one. We'll be able to look at the meteorology, and that'll tell us exactly where we need to go. So here's the water vapor imagery. You can see big old trough here centered over the western half of the continental United States. Big sort of long wave trough here, and you can see a few little swirls embedded, a few little short waves embedded in this long wave trough. You can see one here centered off the northern California coast, and then one here over the Four Corners region. And that is going to be our main feature that is going to be the main driver for tomorrow's severe weather setup. This trailing short wave is going to be the Sunday severe weather setup driver, but we're going to focus on this wave here that is centered over the Four Corners right now. It's going to continue to eject into the plains off to the northeast as we go through the night tonight and into tomorrow. And we've already seen some semblance of surface cyclogenesis as a result on the lee side of the Rockies. If we take a look at our surface map here, first here's our 500 millibar map. You can see those two kind of short waves here. The first one off the California coast centered right here, and the short wave in the Four Corners region centered right there. Pretty potent flow rounding the base of that trough, upwards of 70, 80 knots there. Again, that will continue to eject into the Central Plains and the Midwest tomorrow, and then this one will start to dig down on the heels of this first wave for Sunday, and then into Monday for the southeast. Let's go down to our surface map though, and we will take a look here. We've already seen some semblance of surface cyclogenesis here in far eastern Colorado. Again, as you get these kind of westerly or southwesterly winds to flow over the Rocky Mountains, which are situated somewhere in here, when that flow traverses the Rockies, it goes up and then it sinks. And when it sinks, we get surface cyclogenesis on the lee side of the Rockies. And so that has already started to take place, and that's going to continue to be the case through the night and into tomorrow morning. We should see a pretty potent surface low here somewhere in the Central Plains by tomorrow morning, and that will continue to strengthen throughout the day tomorrow. Let's take a look at our low-level moisture advection and our warm air advection. You can see broad low-level jet here across much of the plains at 850 millibars, extending from far west Texas in through the Midwest here. 55 knots here in Kansas, 45 knots kind of surrounding that. But we've got pretty potent southerly flow. It's going to help drive that moisture northward, push that moisture northward into the Central Plains for tomorrow's event. So let's take a look at our surface map here. So here's all of our surface plots. You can see the 60s dew points confined here to parts of East Texas here. But we do have some pretty solid moisture return into Oklahoma. I stepped outside a little bit earlier here in Norman, Oklahoma, and did feel a nice brisk southerly wind, and definitely feels much more humid than it has the past several weeks here in Oklahoma. So can definitely tell that that moisture is getting transported northward. What's going to happen is that moisture is going to get transported northward here. And let me go ahead and get to our different sector here. So it's going to get transported northward, and going to kind of set up here across eastern Nebraska. That tongue of that moisture will set up across eastern Nebraska. And as that surface low moves off to the east, we'll start to see that moisture wrapping in to eastern Iowa and then wrapping back into the low as it moves off to the northeast. So if we don't have 50s dew points up here in Iowa by the morning, our target area, I wouldn't be too concerned. That moisture is going to get pulled due northward, it looks like. And then as that low advances, we should start to see all that moisture kind of really start to impinge into western Iowa, eastern Nebraska, that region, right at the kind of western edge of that slight risk. And then it will continue to fill in kind of off to the east throughout the afternoon. But good moisture transport, good warm advection already underway, and we can see that from some of our evening soundings tonight. You can see here at Fort Worth, again, we look for we can look at the hodograph to determine the type of advection. And in the low levels, we want to see those veering winds with height, those clockwise turning winds with height, and we definitely have that here in the low levels here at Fort Worth. Fairly deep moist layer. Little bit of a temperature dew point spread here at the surface, but a pretty deep moist layer up to about 800 millibars or so. So fairly deep moisture, which is a good thing in terms of a severe weather threat. If we go up to, let's go to Norman. Kind of the same thing here. A little bit of mixing throughout the afternoon today probably brought those dew points down a little bit, offset a little bit by that warm advection we're seeing, as we saw on the surface plot there. Fairly deep moist layer here up to about 800 millibars once again, and you can see 57 at Norman. So those dew points are rapidly moving northward. You can see those veering winds with height. So we are having warm advection here at the surface. Then let's go closer to our target area for tomorrow. Here is Omaha, and you can really see we've got quite a bit of warm advection here in the low levels. Lots of veering winds in the lowest couple kilometers there. So ample warm advection is underway. So the moisture should not be an issue for tomorrow. Oftentimes these early season setups do have moisture issues. Probably not going to be the case tomorrow. Now, this is going to be a pretty classic sort of cold core type event where you have lots of cold air aloft, strong surface low, and you get that moisture to kind of wrap into the low at the surface and right at the tip of that low, kind of that triple point between that kind of dry line and the warm front feeding back into the low. That's where you see your greatest tornado threat. And we'll take a look at the NAM here. This is the 0Z run of the NAM. So for you guys watching on March 5th, this will be last night's run. You can see our shortwave out here across the desert southwest. That's going to shift off to the northeast as we go throughout the morning hours and into the afternoon today, Saturday. You can see kind of the NAM does have it actually close off a little bit. We do have kind of this closed height contour here. A lot of the model runs previously were not showing that closed contour, so it wasn't technically a pure cold core event, but we are getting a closed height contour there. If we take a look at our temperatures aloft, the grays are going to be our coldest temperatures, and you can see associated with that shortwave, whose axis is kind of right there, we see this big plume of cold air aloft. So that's going to overspread the region. And we may see some storms in the morning. If we go back a little bit in time, we could have a shortwave or two roll through in the morning hours. So we could have some storms early in Nebraska and Iowa. But right behind that, as that dry slot punches in, often these potent kind of closed lows are associated with a pocket of dry air aloft. That will punch in. That will start clearing the skies, and this cold air aloft will rapidly destabilize the atmosphere. So normally when you have storms in the morning, oftentimes you won't destabilize enough by the afternoon to get storms to go. Well, in this case, the air is so cold aloft, even if surface temperatures only get to, say, the mid-60s, we'll have such cold air aloft that the lapse rates, or that change in temperature with height, will really steepen, and you can get kind of these low-topped convective storms to fire right with only maybe an hour or two of sunshine after the early morning convection. So that'll be something to watch tomorrow, and I think that's going to be the main kind of sort of mode that we'll see tomorrow. So we've got pretty cold air aloft here. Let's go down to 850 millibars. See how our warm advection does here. So we've got, again, potent low-level jet here across much of the Central Plains into the Midwest. And that strengthens overnight, so that's going to continue to pump that moisture northward that southerly or southwesterly flow going to continue to pump those 50s and 60s dew points up into eastern Nebraska, eastern Kansas by early afternoon tomorrow. And then we will see those winds, those strong winds at just about a kilometer off the surface, really maintain themselves. We see 50 to 60 knots here across central Iowa, southward through Missouri into eastern Oklahoma, western Arkansas. So big, broad, low-level jet here across much of the region. Throughout the day tomorrow, that will continue to pump that moisture in, and we'll see kind of an increase nocturnally with that low-level jet. Let's go down to the surface. First, let's see how our moisture advection goes. So you can see that plume of kind of upper 40s to 50s dew points is kind of up into Nebraska at this point. We can take a look at our surface chart here. This is at just about 4Z on March 5th, so about 10:30 p.m., just before 10:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on Friday, March 4th. And you can see those 50s dew points are already creeping up into southeast Nebraska. This could be a little bit of some moisture pooling here up in southeast Nebraska, but you can see that those 50s dew points have already made their way up to southeast Nebraska, which may be a little bit ahead of schedule. We can see this. So this would be right about midnight. And you can see southeast Nebraska still has those 40s dew points here, according to this run of the NAM. So moisture running a little bit higher than what the model is showing here. So as far as a severe weather threat, that could increase the threat for severe weather tomorrow. And you can see that moisture continue to stream northward throughout the morning. Those 50s dew points reach southeast Nebraska, and we get this kind of pseudo sort of dry line to set up from south Nebraska down south through the plains, kind of our warm front up here, sort of through central Iowa, southeast Nebraska. And our surface low, we'll take a look at the surface contours here in a second. Surface low should be somewhere right in there by 18Z Saturday, about lunchtime today, Saturday. And so that moisture will kind of funnel into that low, and right at the interface of that warm front and kind of that pseudo dryline Pacific front, here's your cold front kind of back out here. The interface of those will be your best shot for an arc of supercells with a tornado threat and perhaps a hail threat as well. Let's actually zoom in before we go any farther here so you can see. So again, we've got those 50s dew points, upper 50s dew points into southeast Nebraska by 21Z or 3 p.m. Central Standard Time today. We get those kind of 50s dew points into much of southern Iowa. So that would be kind of the target area by mid-afternoon, would be that far southwest corner of Iowa there. Let's take a look at our surface map here. You can see surface cyclogenesis underway here. You can see that surface low as we zoom out here. Kind of a broad surface low right there, but it's going to consolidate and move off to the northeast and strengthen throughout the day today, Saturday. So this is interesting. This run kind of showing more of a strung out sort of surface circulation here. Still a pretty potent surface low there. Cold air back here to the northwest. Pretty broad warm sector here with upper low to mid 60s dew points in southeast Nebraska. Southwest Iowa stays in the mid 50s. We'll have to watch that. We could have, again, some storms ongoing throughout the morning hours that may temper the northward advance of this warmer air, that warm front. But if we can get into the mid 60s here, I think we'll be kind of golden for these supercells to fire here. We'll have to watch that. The NAM tends to be a little bit on the cooler side as a bias, so we'll have to watch that tomorrow and see if this is actually the case. If we can get into the 60s here for much of western Iowa, southwest Iowa, then I think it will be game on for severe storms. If it stays in the 50s, maybe a little bit more, that may be able to temper the threat a little bit, but we'll have to watch these surface observations throughout the morning and afternoon today. But you can see nonetheless that we have this low here. It actually was a little bit less strung out here on previous runs. So we'll start, this is our current run, the 0Z NAM, and we'll go back a couple of runs to our 12Z run from Friday morning. And you can see it's got a little bit tighter of a circulation in here, a little bit more well-defined surface low here, instead of this kind of strung out, sort of more elongated surface low. We'll have to watch that as well. These more kind of what we call banana lows. little bit less favorable for discrete supercells as opposed to these more tightly wound kind of surface lows. But we'll have to see if that holds true tomorrow. Nonetheless, we've got a nice potent surface low, our 500 millibar trough centered somewhere out in here, 500 millibar low, or excuse me, the surface low centered somewhere in here, southeast Nebraska, southwest Iowa. And that is a pretty potent combination pretty classic combination for a cold core setup. This is from the paper Davies and Geyer, 2004. John Davies and Jared Geyer. Geyer works at the SPC. Davies is a private meteorologist. He's done a lot of work on cold core tornado setups, and these are two of the sort of schematics for pretty classic increased likelihood for closed sort of 500 millibar low tornado events. And the one that kind of matches our event tomorrow is kind of this B panel over here on the right. We had that kind of pseudo dry line set up, those upper 50s dew points set up somewhere from, say, southeast Nebraska down south through Kansas. If we look at our dew points here, we've got kind of this dry line here, surface low centered somewhere here on the Missouri River there, Nebraska-Iowa border. Our 500 millibar trough centered somewhere out in here. And so we have a little bit of offset there, that moisture feeding into the surface low, our warm front up in here. And right at the interface of those is where we see our best chance for tornadoes. And you can see here on the right, that's pretty much exactly what we have tomorrow. Trailing cold front back out to the northwest. We got a surface low here, which would be centered somewhere in kind of on the Iowa-Nebraska borders, somewhere by mid-afternoon tomorrow. Our 500 millibar circulation centered just off to the northwest. And you can see our warm front there off to the east, that pseudo dry line there to the south, and right at the interface, right just to the east or northeast of the surface low is where you have the best shot for tornadoes. Likely it will be an arc of supercells along that dry line / Pacific front, and those will move quickly off to the northeast. And if they can maintain a discrete nature, which often they do in these cold core kind of setups, and we'll take a look at that in a second here, then we should have a definite tornado threat, particularly any storms closest to that surface low. So let's take a look here. Let's pull some soundings here. We'll do it at 21Z. We'll start up here in southeast Iowa. Then we'll go down a little bit farther south, kind of toward the Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri confluence there. So this is in southwest Iowa, right where the highest dew points are. So you'll notice here we have a little bit of destabilization aloft. Lapse rates of well above 6.5 for the entire column here. And so we have some instability building back in thanks to those steep lapse rates aloft. Decent 3 Cape, 0 to 3 kilometer instability, which is key in these kind of setups. It is at 67 here. And that has come down a little bit from previous runs. If we go back here, let's go ahead and take a look at the 12Z run from yesterday morning at this time. You'll notice that the moisture is a little bit better here, a little bit pooled kind of closer to that surface low, which would be somewhere in here. So let's take a sounding just out ahead of that surface low in where that kind of moisture pools. And you'll notice here that we'll have much stronger instability with these previous runs. Yeah, you can see here the skew T here at right. We have quite a bit more cape here throughout the entire column. A lot more 0 to 3 kilometer instability, 178, which is off the charts as far as low-level instability goes. And in these kind of setups where the low-level shear not quite as strong, you can see here by the hodograph, there is some turning in the low levels, not an overwhelming amount of curvature in the hodograph in the low levels, but enough. And when you have strong low-level instability like we will have, steep lapse rates aloft, especially in the low levels, any low-level shear will get stretched efficiently into the vertical. So we're going to need quite a bit of 0 to 3 kilometer instability tomorrow to build in. You can see these lapse rates as well throughout the column, much stronger, much steeper than what we saw with our current 0Z model run from Friday evening. So something to watch for sure tomorrow. If we can get that more potent moisture pooling just ahead of the low, then I think we'll see a much better chance for tornadic supercells. Still is a threat, still more than adequate here with our current model runs. This is the 0Z run. Still is enough instability, about 600 joules per kilogram of mixed level, mean layer cape through the column. 3 cape is only 67 though. It's definitely come down a little bit. So if we get a little bit more instability, a little bit more low-level instability as well, I think we'll have a better chance for tornadic supercells tomorrow. But again, if we can get that to build in, we only need a little bit of low-level shear, a little bit of hodograph curvature to get that to be stretched into the vertical really efficiently by those steep low-level lapse rates and instability. And you'll notice here, we'll do this earlier model run. This is very similar to other cold core setups we've seen in the past, particularly the Springer, Oklahoma tornado event from April 22nd, 2020 was a very similar event where you had kind of a closed 500 millibar low, potent surface low, and that moisture kind of pooled into that surface low. And this was the proximity sounding from that day. You can see a lot more instability here in the Springer case, but look at that hodograph. Not a whole lot of low-level curvature in the wind. So there is definitely some 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity of 174, which is more than adequate for tornadic supercells. But oftentimes we talk about these large looping hodographs, and we didn't really see that in this case. So you don't really need a lot, again, of low-level shear in these cases. If you have low-level instability, 0 to 3 kilometer cape, 209 here in this case, upwards of 200 joules per kilogram there in the 0 to 3 kilometer layer. If you have that, really steep lapse rates, good instability in the low levels, then you only need a little bit of low-level shear to get lifted into the vertical, and it will be lifted very efficiently by those that strong low-level instability. So we'll have to watch that tomorrow. If we can get a little bit more instability, something like what the 12Z models were showing versus these 0Z models, if we can get something like the 12Z models, then I think we'll have a legitimate tornado threat for sure tomorrow. So I guess finally we'll just take a look at the HRRR just for fun. Again, I don't like looking at the cams, especially in these kind of events. They don't seem to do that great with these kind of cold core events, but we'll take a look anyway, just to kind of give you a best estimate of what the models are showing. Again, you can see that kind of early convection may have an elevated hail threat. Tornado threat will be nil here throughout the morning hours. But again, behind that, it will clear out pretty rapidly. And then right ahead of that surface low, we will see that convection building in kind of an arc of supercells here out ahead of the low. So western Iowa, maybe down into far northwest Missouri, perhaps starting as early as eastern Nebraska, will have a severe threat. And you can see some supercell characteristics within this kind of arc of storms here, especially right ahead of that surface low. So we'll have to watch that tomorrow. A couple of flies in the ointment still with this, but nonetheless, I think the background meteorology is there for a pretty decent early season cold core tornado setup. Again, if you live in these areas, eastern Nebraska, much of Iowa, be prepared for some low top supercells tomorrow with a tornado threat, as well as a hail threat if lapse rates aloft can steepen, as earlier model runs were showing, and then a damaging wind threat, especially as the storms congeal into a line later on in the evening as they push off toward eastern Iowa, southwest Wisconsin. So if you live in these areas, keep your eye on the sky today. Could be an interesting weather day, to say the least. So that's all I've got for now. Again, this was recorded last night, Friday night, so things may have changed by now, Saturday morning. So keep that in mind. These kind of setups it's key to look at the observations and kind of put the models away on the day of the event. You got to look at the surface observations, mesoanalysis to help you pick out that best spot to see perhaps potent supercells with tornadoes today. So that's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.